She was wearing her uniform, showed her ID, and followed all the rules. So why did two officers still handcuff her? The answer cost them everything. Sunday mornings in Atlanta have their own rhythm, slow, deliberate, like the city itself is taking a deep breath before another week of chaos. Sergeant Maya Johnson had driven this particular stretch of Highway 85 more times than she cared to count. 7:45 in the morning, and the Shell station on Riverdale Road sat quiet except for the occasional trucker grabbing coffee and whatever passed for breakfast from the attached convenience store. Maya's 2018 Honda Civic, metallic blue, meticulously maintained, pulled up to pump number 4 with the precision of someone who planned everything down to the minute. She stepped out and her boots hit the asphalt with the crisp authority that 8 years in the Army Reserve had drilled into her bones. Every crease in her ACU uniform was sharp enough to cut glass. The fabric held that fresh pressed look that spoke of discipline, pride, and the kind of attention to detail that separated real soldiers from weekend warriors playing dress-up. Her name tape read Johnson in block letters, and beneath it, the subdued rank insignia of a staff sergeant caught the early morning light. Maya had learned long ago that wearing the uniform meant more than just putting on clothes. Her uncle, General Marcus Johnson, had told her that when she first enlisted, "That uniform isn't a costume, baby girl. It's a promise. You promise to be better than they expect, stronger than they assume, and more professional than they deserve." She slid her debit card into the pump and selected regular unleaded, watching the numbers climb while mentally running through her checklist for the day. Weekend drill at Dobbins Air Reserve Base meant 14 hours of logistics training, equipment inspections, and the particular brand of organized chaos that kept the military machine running. Not glamorous work, but somebody had to make sure the right supplies got to the right places at the right time. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother asking if she had eaten breakfast. Maya smiled despite herself. Some things never changed. 29 years old, 8 years of military service, and her mother still worried about her eating habits like she was heading off to elementary school. The convenience store's glass doors reflected her image as she walked inside. A young black woman in uniform, shoulders back, stride confident. The kind of presence that should command respect automatically. Should being the operative word. "Morning," she said to the cashier, a tired-looking man in his 60s who nodded back with genuine warmth. "Thank you for your service, miss." Maya selected a protein bar and a large coffee, black. Simple fuel for a long day ahead. At the counter, she helped an elderly woman struggling with heavy grocery bags, carrying them to her car without being asked. These small courtesies had been second nature since childhood. Another gift from her uncle's teachings about representing something larger than yourself. That was when she noticed the patrol car. A white Chevrolet Tahoe with Clayton County Police emblazoned on the side had pulled into the station, parking near the air pump. Two officers emerged with the unhurried confidence of men who owned whatever space they occupied. The older one, probably mid-40s, had the thick build of someone who had spent more years behind a desk than chasing suspects. His younger partner moved with the eager energy of someone still trying to prove himself worthy of the badge. Officer David Clark, though Maya would not learn his name until much later, noticed her immediately. Something about the sight struck him as wrong, though he could not articulate exactly what. A black woman in military uniform moving with obvious purpose and confidence somehow did not fit his mental catalog of how Sunday morning at a gas station should look. He nudged his partner, Officer Tommy Rodriguez, and gestured with his chin toward Maya. "Something about that doesn't sit right with me." Rodriguez glanced over, saw nothing particularly noteworthy, and shrugged. "Looks like a soldier getting gas to me." But Clark's attention had already shifted into that hyper-vigilant mode that some officers wore like armor. In his 12 years on the force, he had developed what he called street instincts, a sixth sense for situations that needed closer examination. The fact that his instincts seemed to activate most frequently around black faces in circumstances where they appeared too comfortable, too confident, was something he preferred not to examine too closely. Maya finished paying and walked back to her car, completely unaware that she had become the subject of official interest. She was thinking about the training schedule, wondering if Lieutenant Morrison would finally approve her request for advanced logistics certification, the kind of mundane military concerns that occupied her thoughts on Sunday mornings. She had just finished pumping gas and was replacing the nozzle when she heard the voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss." Maya turned to find Officer Clark approaching with the measured stride of someone accustomed to compliance. His partner hung back near their vehicle, close enough to provide backup but far enough away to maintain plausible deniability if things went sideways. "Yes, officer." Maya's voice carried the crisp professionalism that came naturally after years of military interaction. Polite, direct, no unnecessary flourishes. "Just conducting some routine safety checks this morning. Everything okay out here?" Maya's eyebrows drew together slightly. Safety checks at a gas station seemed unusual, but she had learned not to question authority without good reason. "Everything's fine, thank you." Clark stepped closer, and Maya caught the subtle way his eyes moved over her uniform, lingering on details like a man examining evidence. "Nice uniform. Army?" "Army Reserve, yes sir." "Heading somewhere official?" "Weekend drill at Dobbins." Maya kept her answers short and factual. Something in his tone suggested this was not casual conversation. Clark nodded slowly, as if processing this information through some internal filter. "You know, we've been having issues lately with people wearing military uniforms without proper authorization. It's actually a federal crime." And there it was, the first crack in what had started as a routine morning. Maya felt her stomach tighten slightly, but her expression remained neutral. 8 years of military training had taught her to stay calm under pressure, even when that pressure came from unexpected directions. "I understand that, officer. Is there a specific concern?" "Well, you understand I have to ask. Do you have identification proving your military status?" Maya reached slowly into her cargo pocket and produced her military ID card and driver's license. She handed them over with steady hands, though part of her mind was already calculating how this simple interaction had shifted into something resembling an interrogation. Clark examined the documents with theatrical thoroughness, holding them up to the light as if checking for forgeries. His partner, Rodriguez, had moved closer, drawn by the developing situation but clearly uncomfortable with its direction. "These look legitimate," Clark said finally, though his tone suggested disappointment rather than relief. "They are legitimate," Maya replied evenly. "Officer, may I ask if there's been a specific complaint or incident that prompted this check?" Clark's jaw tightened slightly at being questioned. In his experience, people who asked too many questions usually had something to hide. "Just following procedures, miss. We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area." Maya glanced around the quiet gas station, noting the handful of other customers who had begun to take notice of the interaction. An elderly black man in a veteran's cap was watching with obvious concern. A young Asian woman had paused near the store entrance, cell phone in hand. "Suspicious activity." Maya kept her voice calm, but she could feel the situation sliding away from normal into something else entirely. "What kind of activity?" "The kind that requires police attention," Clark replied, his earlier politeness evaporating. "Now, I'm going to need you to step away from your vehicle." Maya felt the ground shift beneath her feet, though she remained perfectly still. This was no longer about identification or routine checks. This had become something else entirely, and both of them knew it. "Officer, on what basis are you detaining me?" "I'm not detaining you. I'm conducting an investigation into possible fraudulent representation of military personnel." The absurdity of it hit Maya like a physical blow. Here she stood, in a perfectly pressed uniform, with valid identification, explaining her legitimate business to an officer who seemed determined to find problems where none existed. But she also understood that pointing out this absurdity would likely make things worse rather than better. "I've provided valid identification. I've answered your questions. What exactly do you need to investigate?" Clark stepped closer, close enough that Maya could smell the coffee on his breath and see the small muscle twitching in his jaw. "Miss, I'm going to need you to place your hands on your vehicle and assume the position for a safety search." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just beginning to catch. Maya looked into Clark's eyes and saw something that chilled her more than anger or aggression. She saw certainty, the unshakable conviction that he was right, that she was wrong, and that the uniform she wore with such pride was somehow proof of deception rather than service. Around them, the quiet Sunday morning was beginning to buzz with tension. The veteran was moving closer. The young woman with the cell phone had started recording. Even Rodriguez was shifting his weight nervously, sensing that his partner was driving toward a cliff with no intention of slowing down. Maya took a slow breath and made a choice that would echo far beyond this gas station. This morning, this moment when everything normal began to crack apart. "Officer," she said quietly, "I think you should reconsider what you're about to do." Part 2. The Escalation. Clark's face hardened at Maya's suggestion that he reconsider. In his world, advice from civilians, especially civilians who happened to be black and female, ranked somewhere below traffic suggestions from his ex-wife. Useful as a chocolate teapot and twice as irritating. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. Now." Maya remained perfectly still, her training kicking in like muscle memory. 8 years of weekend drills had taught her that the wrong move at the wrong time could escalate situations beyond repair. But they had also taught her that rolling over without resistance was not always the smart play either. "Officer, I've complied with every request you've made. I've provided identification that proves my military status. What specific crime do you suspect me of committing?" The question hung in the air like an unwelcome truth at a family reunion. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, his instincts telling him this was heading somewhere his pension did not want to follow. A few more customers had gathered near the store entrance, phones emerging from pockets like flowers blooming in fast forward. Clark noticed the growing audience and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with being watched. Some officers wilted under public scrutiny. Clark had always found it energizing. After all, what was the point of having authority if you could not exercise it when people were paying attention? "The crime of impersonating military personnel," he said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "It's a federal offense that carries serious penalties." Maya blinked slowly, processing the sheer audacity of the accusation. Here she stood in a perfectly regulation uniform, with valid military identification, being accused of impersonating herself. It was like being told you were driving a stolen car while sitting in your own driveway with the title in your hand. "Officer Clark," she said, reading his name tag for the first time, "I am military personnel. I've shown you my identification. What additional proof do you require?" "Anyone can get fake identification these days," Clark replied, warming to his theme. "We see it all the time. People buying uniforms online, printing fake IDs, walking around pretending to be heroes." The veteran in the baseball cap took a step forward. "Son, I served 30 years in the Army. That woman is a soldier. Any fool can see it." Clark whipped around to face the new speaker, his authority challenged from yet another direction. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back and let me do my job." "Your job?" The veteran's voice carried the particular brand of disgust reserved for people who had never earned the right to question military service. "Your job is protecting and serving, not harassing soldiers in parking lots." Rodriguez finally found his voice. "Dave, maybe we should call this in. Get a supervisor down here." Clark shot his partner a look that could have melted steel. The last thing he needed was supervision when he was trying to maintain control of what should have been a simple interaction. "I don't need a supervisor to handle one woman with questionable documentation." Maya almost smiled at that. Questionable documentation. As if her military ID had been printed on a home computer using Comic Sans font and laminated at Kinko's. "Officer Clark," she said, "would you like me to call my commanding officer?" "I'm sure Colonel Martinez would be happy to verify my status." The suggestion seemed to irritate Clark even further. "No phone calls until we sort this out. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle." "Am I under arrest?" "You're being detained for investigation." "Of what specific crime?" "I told you, impersonating military personnel." "Yes, I heard you." Maya's voice remained calm, but something in her tone had shifted. The polite deference was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something that suggested Clark might be picking a fight with the wrong person on the wrong day. The young Asian woman with the phone, Lisa Chen, though Maya would not learn her name until later, stepped closer to get a better angle on her video. She had been recording since the conversation started, and her social media instincts told her this was about to become the kind of content that broke the internet. Clark noticed the phone, and his irritation spiked into genuine anger. "Ma'am, you need to stop recording and move away from this investigation." Lisa did not move. "This is a public place. I have the right to record. You have the right to interfere with police business?" "I have the right to document police business," Lisa replied with the confidence of someone who had done her homework on constitutional law. Maya watched this exchange with growing concern. What had started as an inconvenient misunderstanding was rapidly expanding into something that would be difficult to contain. More people were gathering. More phones were coming out. The quiet Sunday morning was transforming into a public spectacle, and she found herself at the center of it. Clark seemed to realize this as well, but instead of stepping back, he doubled down. "Everyone needs to move back and give us space to work." "Work?" The veteran laughed bitterly. "Son, I've seen a lot of police work in my time. This isn't work. This is something else entirely." Maya felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced during her first deployment to Afghanistan, when the situation on the ground shifted from routine to dangerous without warning. The feeling that told her the rules of engagement were about to change, and not in her favor. She thought about her uncle Marcus, about the stories he had told her growing up. Stories about serving in an army that did not always welcome black officers with open arms, and about proving yourself over and over again to people who would never admit you belonged, about maintaining dignity in situations designed to strip it away. "The uniform doesn't make you bulletproof," he had told her once, "but it does make you responsible. Responsible for representing everyone who wore it before you and everyone who will wear it after." Maya straightened her shoulders slightly, a gesture so subtle most people would have missed it. But Rodriguez noticed, and something about it made him even more uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. Clark pulled out his handcuffs. The metallic click as he opened them seemed unnaturally loud in the morning air. Several people in the crowd audibly gasped. Lisa Chen adjusted her phone angle to make sure she captured everything. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Maya looked at the handcuffs, then at Clark's face, then at the growing crowd of witnesses. She was facing one of those moments that define a person's character. The kind of moment where backing down might be the smart play, but where backing down also meant accepting something fundamentally wrong. "Officer Clark," she said quietly, "I want to make sure I understand what's happening here. You're placing me under arrest for impersonating a military service member, despite the fact that I've provided valid military identification." "That's correct." "And you're doing this in front of multiple witnesses who are recording the interaction?" Clark hesitated for just a moment, but pride pushed him forward. "That's correct." Maya nodded slowly. "And you're absolutely certain this is the course of action you want to take? Turn around, now." Maya looked once more at the crowd, at Rodriguez's troubled expression, at Lisa Chen's phone camera capturing every second. Then she looked back at Clark and made a decision that would echo far beyond this gas station. "Officer Clark, before you do something that cannot be undone, I think you should know that you're about to arrest the niece of General Marcus Johnson. You might want to think about how that's going to look on your record." The words hit Clark like cold water. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. But he had come too far to back down now, with too many people watching, too much authority already committed. "I don't care if you're the niece of the president. Turn around." Maya took a deep breath and slowly turned to face her vehicle. As she placed her hands behind her back, she said just loud enough for the crowd to hear, "I'd like to make one phone call." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, and the Sunday morning quiet was broken by the sound of Lisa Chen's voice narrating for her phone camera. "This is unbelievable. They just arrested a soldier in uniform for being a soldier in uniform." Rodriguez was already reaching for his radio, his gut telling him this was about to become the kind of incident that ended careers. But Clark was still riding the wave of his own authority, still convinced he was in control of a situation that had already spiraled far beyond anyone's control. As Maya was guided toward the patrol car, she caught the eye of the veteran in the baseball cap. He gave her a small nod, not approval, but recognition. The recognition of one service member acknowledging another's dignity under impossible circumstances. And in that moment, Maya knew that whatever happened next, she had done exactly what her uncle would have expected her to do. She had represented the uniform with honor, even when that honor was not being returned. The patrol car door closed behind her with a finality that echoed across the gas station parking lot. But Maya was already thinking about that phone call she had requested, already thinking about the conversation that was about to turn this Sunday morning from a local incident into something much larger. Clark had made his choice. Now it was time for Maya to make hers. Part 3. The phone call that changed everything. The back seat of a patrol car has its own particular atmosphere. Part confession booth, part isolation chamber, all humiliation. Maya sat with her hands cuffed behind her back, the vinyl seat warm against her uniform, and considered the strange turns a Sunday morning could take. 30 minutes ago, she had been worried about whether she had packed enough energy bars for drill weekend. Now she was contemplating how to explain to her commanding officer that she was calling from police custody. Clark slammed the driver's door with the satisfaction of a man who had restored order to his universe. In the front passenger seat, Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, his radio crackling with routine chatter that seemed absurdly normal given the circumstances. "So," Clark said, adjusting his rearview mirror to make eye contact with Maya, "about that phone call you wanted to make." Maya met his gaze steadily. "I'd like to exercise my right to contact my commanding officer. It's standard protocol when military personnel are detained." Clark's expression suggested he found military protocol about as compelling as a parking ticket. "You'll get your phone call when we get to the station." "Actually," Rodriguez interjected quietly, "if she's active military, we're supposed to—" "She's not active military," Clark cut him off. "She's someone wearing a uniform she probably bought online, hoping to get discounts at restaurants." The certainty in his voice was almost impressive. Here was a man who had decided on a version of reality and was committed to it with the dedication of a religious convert. Facts that contradicted his worldview were simply obstacles to be dismissed. Maya closed her eyes briefly, thinking about her uncle's advice from years ago. "Baby girl, there comes a time in every black person's life when you have to decide whether to be right or be safe. Most of the time, you choose safe. But sometimes being right is the only choice that lets you sleep at night." "Officer Clark," she said calmly, "I'm going to ask you one more time to let me make that phone call. Not because I'm trying to get out of anything, but because what you're about to step into is much bigger than you realize." Clark laughed, a sound with all the warmth of breaking glass. "Let me guess. You know people. Important people. People who are going to be very upset when they hear about this." "Something like that." Outside the patrol car, the crowd had grown. Lisa Chen was still recording, providing running commentary for her followers with the expertise of a seasoned journalist. The veteran in the baseball cap had been joined by two other older men, all wearing some variation of military insignia on their clothing. A small gathering of Sunday morning protesters, united by outrage and the peculiar entertainment value of watching authority figures dig their own graves. Rodriguez's radio crackled again, this time with a call that made him sit up straighter. "Unit 47, we have multiple reports of crowd gathering at your location. Status report requested." Clark grabbed the radio before his partner could respond. "Unit 47, situation under control. One subject in custody for investigation of fraudulent military representation." There was a pause from dispatch. "Copy that. Unit 47. Please confirm you followed proper identification verification procedures." Another pause, this one longer. Clark's jaw tightened as he realized his handling of the situation was already under scrutiny. "All procedures followed correctly," he lied smoothly. Maya shook her head slowly. Even handcuffed in the back of a police car, she felt sorry for Clark. The man was doubling down on mistakes like a gambler who had convinced himself the next hand would fix everything. "Officer Clark," she said quietly, "you still have time to make this right. I don't need you to tell me how to do my job." "No," Maya agreed, "but you might need me to help you keep it." That got his attention. Clark turned around fully to face her, his eyes narrow with suspicion and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine concern. "What's that supposed to mean?" Maya took a deep breath. Outside, Lisa Chen was explaining to her phone camera how the situation had escalated from a simple gas station stop to what appeared to be an arrest based on racial profiling. The video had already been shared dozens of times, the view count climbing with the steady inevitability of a natural disaster. "Officer Clark," My full name is Maya Elizabeth Johnson. My military identification number is 4478962. I am a staff sergeant in the 94th Army Reserve Logistics Battalion based at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. My commanding officer is Colonel James Martinez. My emergency contact, Maya paused for effect, is General Marcus Johnson, Deputy Director of Military Personnel Policy at the Pentagon. The words hit the patrol car like stones thrown at a window. Rodriguez went completely still. Clark's face went through several interesting color changes, settling somewhere between pale and green. "You're lying," Clark said, but his voice had lost its earlier conviction. "Officer, I need you to think very carefully about what happens next. You can continue down this path, complete your arrest, and tomorrow morning find yourself explaining to your chief why you handcuffed the niece of a two-star general. Or," Maya leaned forward as much as the handcuffs allowed, "you can let me make that phone call, and we can all pretend this was just a misunderstanding between professionals." Rodriguez was already reaching for his phone, probably to call their supervisor. The crowd outside had grown larger, phones raised like digital torches in the morning light. And somewhere in Clark's expression, the first cracks of doubt were beginning to show. Maya pressed her advantage. "The number is area code 202, Pentagon main switchboard. Ask for General Johnson's office. Tell them Staff Sergeant Maya Johnson needs to speak with her uncle about a situation involving local law enforcement." The silence in the patrol car was broken only by the distant sound of traffic, and Lisa Chen's voice explaining to her audience why this was about to become a very different kind of story. Clark stared at Maya for a long moment, his mind probably racing through the potential consequences of arresting a general's niece versus the embarrassment of admitting he had made a massive error in judgment. Pride warred with survival instinct, and for a few seconds the outcome was genuinely uncertain. Finally, Rodriguez made the decision for both of them. "Dave, we need to make that call." Clark's phone rang before he could respond. The caller ID showed Captain Mitchell. "This is Clark." Captain Sarah Mitchell's voice came through the speaker with the clarity of authority and the edge of someone who had just been blindsided by a situation she did not want to manage. "Clark, I've got the mayor's office on line 2 and the base commander at Dobbins on line 3. They both want to know why we've arrested a staff sergeant in uniform. Please tell me you have a very good explanation." Clark looked at Maya in the rearview mirror. Maya looked back with an expression of patient inevitability, like someone waiting for gravity to work. "Captain, we received reports of suspicious activity and—" "Clark, did you verify her military identification?" "Yes, ma'am, but—" "And did you follow standard procedure for interactions with military personnel?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was definitely going to spread. Clark's silence was answer enough. "I'm en route," Captain Mitchell said. "Do not move. Do not process. Do not do anything until I get there. And Clark, you better hope this is fixable." The line went dead. Maya cleared her throat politely. "Officer Clark, I believe this would be an excellent time for that phone call." 20 minutes later, Maya stood next to her Honda Civic, rubbing her wrist where the handcuffs had been. Captain Mitchell had arrived like a force of nature, assessed the situation with the efficiency of someone accustomed to cleaning up other people's messes, and immediately set about damage control. Clark stood nearby, his earlier confidence replaced by the hollow-eyed expression of a man contemplating career suicide. Rodriguez had spent the last 10 minutes apologizing to anyone who would listen, including the veteran in the baseball cap, who had graciously accepted his contrition. "Sergeant Johnson," Captain Mitchell said, approaching with the careful deference of someone who had just spent 15 minutes on the phone with increasingly senior military officials. "On behalf of the Clayton County Police Department, I want to offer you our sincerest apologies for this incident." Maya nodded acknowledgement but did not smile. "Captain, I appreciate the apology, but this isn't really about me." "Ma'am," Maya gestured toward the crowd, many of whom were still recording. "How many other people have been subjected to this kind of treatment without having a general for an uncle? How many others have been handcuffed and humiliated based on assumptions about who they are and whether they belong in the uniform they're wearing?" Captain Mitchell's expression showed she understood exactly what Maya was asking. "That's a fair question, Sergeant, and it's one we're going to be addressing. Lisa Chen approached with her phone still recording. Sergeant Johnson, would you like to make a statement? Maya considered the question carefully. Her uncle had always told her that with privilege came responsibility, the responsibility to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. I'd like people to understand that what happened here today happens to people every day, in different ways, in different places. The only difference is that I had resources most people don't have. I had connections, I had knowledge of my rights, and I had people willing to intervene on my behalf. Maya looked directly into the camera. Not everyone has those advantages, and until that changes, we'll keep having mornings like this one. She paused, thinking about her uncle's stories, about the generations of black service members who had faced suspicion and disrespect while defending a country that questioned their right to exist in uniform. But I also want people to know that change is possible. Captain Mitchell could have defended her officers regardless of the facts. Officer Rodriguez could have stayed silent when he knew something was wrong. The people here could have walked away instead of bearing witness. Change happens when good people choose to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable. Maya turned to Clark, who had been standing in increasingly uncomfortable silence. Officer Clark, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you made assumptions based on your own experiences and biases. We all do that. The question is what you do when you realize you were wrong. Clark looked at her for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions like a man watching his entire worldview reorganize itself. Finally, he spoke. I was wrong, completely wrong, and I'm sorry. It was not eloquent, but it was honest. And sometimes honesty was enough to start the conversation that needed to happen. Captain Mitchell cleared her throat. Sergeant Johnson, if you're willing, we'd like to invite you to participate in our training programs. Help us make sure this doesn't happen again. Maya smiled for the first time that morning. Captain, I'd be honored. As the crowd began to disperse and the patrol cars prepared to leave, Maya found herself standing with the veteran in the baseball cap. He had introduced himself as Sergeant Major Williams, retired, 30 years with the 82nd Airborne. You handled that well, young lady. Your uncle would be proud. Thank you, Sergeant Major. But honestly, I was scared the whole time. Williams chuckled. Good. Being scared means you understood the stakes, not being paralyzed by the fear. That's what separates real soldiers from wannabes. Maya got back into her Honda Civic and started the engine. She was going to be late for drill weekend, but she had a feeling Colonel Martinez would understand. She also had a feeling this Sunday morning was going to be talked about for a long time. As she pulled out of the gas station, she passed Lisa Chen, who was wrapping up her live stream with a final thought. Sometimes justice looks like handcuffs being removed instead of applied. Sometimes it looks like apologies instead of arrests. And sometimes it looks like a phone call that reminds everyone that dignity isn't negotiable, no matter who you are or where you come from. Maya drove toward the base, thinking about her uncle's words, about the uniform she wore, and about the responsibility that came with both. Change was possible, but it required people willing to stand up when standing up was difficult. It required people willing to make uncomfortable phone calls and ask difficult questions. Most of all, it required people willing to remember that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of what assumptions others might make about who they were or where they belonged. The Sunday morning sun climbed higher in the Georgia sky, warming a world where at least one small corner had become a little more just than it had been an hour before. And sometimes, Maya reflected, that was how real change happened. One phone call, one conversation, one moment of courage at a time.